All righty. Well, welcome back. Freedom Friday. This is our ninth podcast week. We're excited to be here and thanks for tuning in. We're going to start today with our health segment, which is exciting as always. And we're going to have my dad, John Jack Gamby, leading the way on that. So go ahead, sir.
This is very exciting. You better sit down. And these are things, unfortunately, I've learned since I graduated from medical school, not in medical school. I should have said pharmaceutical school. But anyway, I guess the basic principle is injuries to a great extent and illness is due to inadequate nutrition. When your body doesn't get what it needs, you are going to be more vulnerable to whatever stress you're exposed to, whether it's jumping off a ledge or if it's being exposed to cholera. Interestingly, this past week we were traveling through western or eastern Idaho along the old Oregon Trail, and we were in a and this could be repeated if you happen to go to the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center in Baker, Oregon. But no matter where you go, if you talk about the pioneers and their travels, you hear stories of cholera and how the cholera, one of the sayings that was common was you'd get up and eat breakfast with your family and eat dinner with your ancestors. That's how tragic this cholera problem was. But the underlying point that we should all understand is that everybody that got cholera did not die. 200 years, maybe not that, 150, 200 years ago, scientists in Russia, I can't remember both their names, but one was Mechnikov. He apparently discovered white blood cells. But anyway, these scientists understood that it's not necessarily the bug, it's where the bug finds itself, whether or not it has the ability to multiply and cause trouble. So he and his fellow scientists took a culture from an individual that died of cholera. They took a stool sample and cultured it and gave it time to allow the bugs in the sample to multiply, and then they drank the culture. One of them had a little bit of diarrhea for a day or so, the other one didn't get sick at all. But obviously these people were much better, much more nourished, more well nourished than the pioneers that were trying to survive on beans and rice and coffee. So we have to understand that illness is a result of a weakness in our body. If I jumped off a 6-foot ledge, I'd probably be crippled. But if my son or grandson jumped off the ledge, they'd probably walk away and let's do it again. I'll do a flip this time. But anyway, so we have to realize, and then we have to realize that our food has gradually been adulterated or deprived. And the main reason food is processed and refined is to increase the shelf life. Here again, the bottom line is money. If I can make more money, I'll give you a loaf of bread that's been deprived. When I was growing up, there was this thing called Wonder Bread, and it was advertised as enriched flour. Well, they took whole flour and just there's a list here I'm going to read briefly. The milling of wheat into white flour removes 40% of the chrome, 76% of manganese, 89% of cobalt, 68% of copper, molybdenum, calcium, phosphorus, 85% of the magnesium. And one of the major causes of heart disease, the number one killer in this country, is magnesium deficiency. And then the vitamins is just as bad. 82% of thiamine, 83% of B5, 98% of the vitamin E is removed from wheat. And so going from whole wheat to Wonder Bread is a step in the right direction if you're trying to get silk. And it's also a step in the right direction if you're going to try and sell people medications that treat the illnesses that are caused by the removal of these nutrients from the food. Very interesting stuff. And I remember in grade school, we had a study in our science class. That's some time ago. I don't know if they do this anymore. They'd take a piece of Wonder Bread and put it on a plate in the classroom. Then they'd take a piece of whole wheat bread that cooked at home and put it on a dish and watch what happens. And you see the whole wheat bread got moldy in just a few days. The quote Wonder Bread didn't get moldy at all. It might last for several weeks. It gets hard, no question about that, but it doesn't get moldy, which teaches us, I hope, that even mold, as simple of organism as that is, cannot survive on Wonder Bread. But we think we can just survive. One of the kind of jokes, and sometimes in the cafeteria in school, we get into what they call food fights. One of the best things to use in a food fight is to get a piece of bread and just squish it up in your hand for a few seconds, and makes a great throwing object. But anyway, and they've done a study. They study rats. And in one study, let me just read this, Roger Williams, the author of Biochemical Individuality. He after 90 days on the commercial bread diet, about 2/3 of the animals were dead of malnutrition, and the survivors were severely stunted, whereas practically all the animals on the in whole wheat bread were alive and growing. So that's what we're trying to raise our families on Wonder Bread. And it's not going to work, and we're going to be more susceptible. And then, of course, there's some principle, I can't think of the name, have held anyway, where you create a problem and then you come along with the solution to the problem that you've created. That's a principle that I think our government operates on. So anyway, the price of things are going up, so what do? We print more money. But that's a different segment of our thing we're doing here. And so, and you see so many instances of this. Let's talk about salt for a minute. For millennia, salt was as good as wasn't the money they used, because everybody realized how critical it was to health. You really couldn't surprise, and you early shipping people on the board ship that preserved their food in salt. Well, one of the reasons is salt, it comes from ocean water, and seawater has a very similar mineral content as the blood plasma that's so necessary for our lives. And so what is unfortunately our captured medical profession do? They say salt's bad for you. Salt will raise your blood pressure. And that's not true. Many studies have shown that your salt intake is really not directly related to your blood pressure. And the other thing is, what is salt? Well, salt traditionally was dried seawater. And that's why you see in Africa, they have people, their whole profession was taking their camels out to the salt mines. They'd harvest the salt, then they'd take the salt to market. That was their whole life. Or the various sources of salt. But it's crucial. to and cultures, people, the tribes did not survive without salt. Well, the commercialization of the salt, they found the real salt got clumps. It would cake and get hard, and it wasn't really easy to use. So to make our life easier, they commercialized salt. They removed all the trace minerals, and the only thing left is sodium and chloride. And then guess what they added to it? Because even that would cake and become lumpy. They added talc. And I don't know if you'd followed this, but talc powder has been found to cause cancer. And there's quite a large legal lawsuit against the Johnson and Johnson. Oh, they also made a vaccine, didn't they? That's interesting. But they fought it because they thought giving babies powdering babies' bottoms with talc was very profitable, because then the other ingredients didn't get lumpy and they could sell more. But talc is a carcinogen, and they lost the lawsuit. But all there is in Morton's easy to pour salt is sodium and chloride and talc. Whereas you get whole salt, yeah, it's very interesting. I was looking at the trace mineral analysis of seawater, and it's very, very interesting. Zinc, copper, manganese, cobalt, nickel, molybdenum, vanadium, iodine, lithium, rubidium, strontium, barium, and silicon. Those are just the minor ones. There's also the major ones, calcium and magnesium and a few others. But those are the things that we should be getting in our diet in generous quantities. And so maybe I can just leave you here with an idea that I think would improve your own health. It's not my idea, but I've incorporated it into my routine. It's interesting. As I get older, my routine increases. It takes me about 45 minutes to get up and get into circulation. But one of them is I get a good sea salt, or the Bonneville salt flats, which is generally a sea plant, Redmond salt, or you can buy bulk salt. There's a pink salt, Himalayan salt, they call it. That's mountain, but once upon a time, it was underwater. That's interesting. That's another little topic that is fun to discuss.
Which mountain was that?
Himalayans.
Oh, the whole Himalayas were underwater at one point.
That's interesting. Just a little aside, as you drive up the Columbia River Gorge, as we did a couple times this past, you see on the Oregon side, there are these large cliffs, and there's a legend about the Bridge of the Gods. But anyway, on the Washington side, you see where obviously there's very violent, catastrophic movement of the earth. You see whole layers of mountain just have been pulled up out of the ground. But anyway, I get distracted easily. I guess that's a sign of age. But you get the sea salt, then you buy some double-aught gelatin capsules, and you fill those with the salt. And then you do your intuitive testing and see how many of those you need a day. I tested this, and I take 1 or 2 capsules full of salt most days. And it's a way I feel is a very effective way, inexpensive and safe way of protecting myself from additional trace mineral deficiencies, which will then improve my because if you look at the function of these different trace minerals, just for example, zinc is an important enzyme cofactor. Cobalt, needed in small amounts anyway, they all have very definite. It's very interesting to look at the biochemistry of the conversion of sugar, which is stored as glycogen in the body. But to get it to be able to be utilized, it has to be converted into glucose. And it's a biochemical reaction that has about 12 or 15 steps. And each one of these steps requires cofactors. They're B vitamins, which, by the way, are mostly removed from the bread. Quickly, there's thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, pantothen, and folic acid. All are B vitamins, and the range of removal is 75 to 82%. I mean, how are you going to metabolize sugar if you don't have the necessary cofactors to make these chemical changes on these various steps of converting sugar? If you wonder, maybe you're tired. Well, maybe it's because you can't get the energy you need from the sugar you've stored. And we eat junk and we get fat, but we can't convert the fat into energy. And we wonder why we're tired. But anyway.
And so you're saying the trace mineral deficiency is preventing this reaction inside some of us that would convert the fat into energy.
Right.
Oh, but so missing out on all those minerals in the bread or in the salt that they're selling us.
Or in any food. And that's the whole purpose of processing food.
Yeah.
So the mold, like the mold in the bread,
won't grow.
And
so it's actually a good sign when your food gets a little moldy.
Well, it's probably a little better than the stuff that doesn't get moldy. Be careful of food that doesn't spoil.
Yeah.
That's in my church we have a little principles called the Word of Wisdom, trying to teach us. But it's very interesting that the preface to the Word of Wisdom is it's necessary, quote, because of the designs of evil and conspiring men that do and will exist in the latter days. That's the only reason we have the word. We need the Word of Wisdom because of these men. Oh, gee, that sounds familiar. But anyway, that's probably enough. But seriously consider just going ahead and taking a double-out capsule of sea salt. But don't, here, a little caveat, take it on an empty stomach. I learned that the hard way. I was told that, but I didn't believe it. And so one day I forgot to take my salt. I took my salt right after I'd had my breakfast. And sure enough, about 5 minutes later, I was vomiting. And I learned.
Really?
Yeah, so you want to take your salt on an empty stomach. And then you don't even, there's no problem. So, and make sure some people won't tolerate a whole, but that's why you want to do the testing. Maybe you only need a single lot capsule, or maybe you need 3 double lot capsules for a while. I don't know. Everybody's different, and so that's the demonstrates the importance of learning intuitive testing. So have a good day, learn to be healthier, and have the courage. Remember the old admonition, the price of happiness is freedom, and the price of freedom is courage. And freedom from disease and injury and slowing down the aging process is real important. I'm learning as I age. Okay, have a good day.
Yeah, so transitioning then to some of our other topics here. We were talking a little bit before we got on here about how we have a similar theme running through all of our topics, whether it be the stealth side or the wealth side or the health side. And we were talking about the idea that my dad is trying to encourage people to take more responsibility for their health in a world that's kind of training us, or has been training us for the last 50, 60 years, to give more of that responsibility to somebody else. that a fair way to say it?
That's a good way to say it. Well, and there's a big fear factor in there. The psychologists will tell us that fear is a great motivator, and we've been told all of our lives that your health is too important to do it yourself. I think that came from the medical schools.
Yeah.
But I think the real motto should be your health is too important to leave in the hands of your doctor, because the doctor's in the hands of the pharmaceutical industry, because that's where the money is. Your health is too important to leave in. Now, of course, if you're having a heart attack, or if you're having, we'll talk about that some other day. But if you have broken your arm, or you're bleeding profusely, anyway, there's lots of time you want to go to the doctor. It's important, and you got to use a little common sense. So when I say it's for chronic disease, I'm encroaching on your time.
It doesn't matter. It's fine.
I was just talking to a friend of mine who asked me a couple questions about multiple sclerosis. That's a very difficult disease, but it's an autoimmune disease, and it can cripple people, and sometimes the medications they use are worse than the disease. But I was just reading, some people have successfully treated multiple sclerosis with DMSO, and one of these days we'll talk about that. And there's a doctor down in Brazil who's treating with mega doses of vitamin D successfully. They're getting rid of this condition. And so here, vitamin D, we're told we only need a few milligrams a day. Well, some people that's correct, just like jumping off a ledge. Some people only need a few milligrams of vitamin D. Other people need huge doses, 200,000 units a day. And that should only be done under supervision of a properly trained doctor, not some doctor that think, anyway. It's a bell-shaped curve for everybody. So anyway.
Yeah. But that's so you're trying to share the point that much of our health can be done by ourselves. We can learn the things we do. We can eat the appropriate food. We can supplement it if needed, and we can avoid a lot of the diseases and that put us in the hospital in the first place.
That's right. But prevention is a tough sell, because I can't prove that taking vitamin C will prevent heart attack.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people have proven that, but it's the fear factor, all that, and see. So going over to our stealth side for a minute here. See, that's the thing that happens, right? There's this saying in popular culture that the government doesn't like to waste a crisis. So the idea being that when a crisis presents itself, that's a wonderful opportunity for the government to grow.
That's exactly right. And it's the same for almost every profession. Yeah. If you can show, oh, look at all these people dying, it must be a virus. And so we're going to make a vaccine to make billionaires out of the pharmaceutical industry. And even though it's a myth. Yeah. And guess who produced that pandemic? If we read the literature now, we see, oh, gee, maybe the pharmaceutical companies created that, quote, virus, end quote.
And then created the solution.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's funny how much progress has been made over the last few years. Just 10 or 12 years ago, it was a common idea in society that the pharmaceutical companies didn't make any money off of vaccine. I was told that over and over and over again by all kinds of good friends and family members. They said the pharmaceutical companies aren't in the vaccine industry for profit. They just do it philanthropically. And it's amazing how far we've come from that, and thank goodness that the word is getting out there, and now nobody even makes that argument anymore. It's such a old argument, that archaic argument, that people aren't even making that one anymore. So a lot of progress has been made. But yeah, this idea that fear can motivate us, and in the stealth world, fear creates the need for us to give up our freedoms, to give up our responsibilities, and turn those responsibilities over to the government. In the health world, we turn that over to the insurance companies or to the big medical professions. But freedom requires courage, and we want to wrestle some of that responsibility back and take some of that responsibility back into our own lives. Take responsibility for our health, take responsibility for our freedom. So uh, it's also very interesting how the legislation is frequently already written before the crisis happens. So they put through a 500-page bill or a 10,000-page bill or a 1,800-page bill. It's remarkable that that legislation has already been written and crafted by somebody, even though they say it's in response to the current crisis.
That's right.
But there's these legions of people that are working on behalf of a growing government business, and as the government expands, their careers also expand, and so that's their job. Their job is to create the legislation so it's ready to go when the crisis happens. So,
and a little addition to what you just said is
yeah,
that it would be interesting for someone to study, and they already have, I know, but how many of these fear-generated crises we have solved through government action. Let's see, the war on terror, not yet. The war on poverty, not yet. The war on hunger, no, the farms are going out of business. I mean, you go down the list and you just see, well, maybe the government isn't the best solution. Maybe we should turn people loose. You know, they've hidden most of Tesla's inventions because they, what's that old thing? Don't steal. The government doesn't like competition. Something like that.
Right. Right. It's amazing the things that we permit under the guise of government that we would never allow our neighbors to do, or even our community to do. But under the idea of government, we permit it. So Freedom Bees isn't about just moaning and groaning all day. We're an action-based group, an action-based podcast. I hope you listen to us while you're doing something productive, going on a walk, gardening, playing with your kids. You can put us on in the background. Uh, the idea isn't to train you to sit for hours every week listening to us or scrolling through our stuff. The idea is that you listen to the things we're talking about and figure out how they apply in your life and take action. So with government, the way it works in America is we get to hold our elected representatives accountable. We can interact with them all the time. You can send emails, letters, you can show up at city council or the board meeting, or there's public comment. Depending on the government body, you got to learn how that works. So there's a lot of interaction that can take place all the time. But true accountability for elected representatives only happens when they get elected or not elected again. So you can have these discussions, but you can't really hold them accountable except with your vote. And so the problem that we're dealing with in America is most of us don't know who our representatives are. We all know who the president is, and then from that point down, it gets really cloudy. We don't know who our judges are. A lot of us don't know who our sheriffs are. We don't know who our city councilors are. We don't know who our school board members are. We don't know who our county commissioners are. And if we don't even know who they are, it's a very, very slim chance that we know what they voted for. And if we don't know what they voted for, then how could we ever hold them accountable when it comes time to elect or to not reelect them? The idea that we should just elect people because they have a certain letter next to their name is a little bit. It's not really an American idea. American means self-governing, and self-directed, and participating in the process. And to just say, "Hey, my family's been a part of this party for 60 years, and I'm going to vote for whatever they say." I'm going to raise a couple question marks about that because we need to be participating more if we're actually going to have a viable free country. Benjamin Franklin, one of his famous quotes was, "We've given you a republic if you can keep it." So so our stealth segment. The challenge this week is I'm going to challenge you to find out somebody that is your elected representative. Now, in my part of the world, there's 24 different boards and governing bodies that rule over me. They have the ability to change my taxes. They have the ability to change the price of our schools, our electricity, our fire department. Ada's not in here, dear. I don't know. So I can't learn all of them all at once, but the key is to do something this week. So I'm encouraging you to take 15 minutes and find out a few people that represent you. Write it down so you don't forget it, and then interact with them. Interact with them about something. Read the notes and find out what they voted for. Take 15 minutes and do something about it. We will never be able to do the great job that is in our power to do if millions and millions of us don't start holding our elected officials accountable by becoming educated on what they're doing. Now, there's still 14 Americans to every government employee. There's hundreds of Americans for every elected representative in the country. So, sure, I can't do it on my own. My dad can't do it on his own. Even as the two of us together, we can't do it. But there's plenty of us to actually do the job if enough of us get involved in doing it, right? So if there's 15 of us for every government employee, and there's hundreds and thousands of us for every elected official, there's plenty of us to hold them accountable to do the job we'd like them to do, which is to make us more free. So, but we gotta do it. We gotta start participating in the actual process. So that's stealth segment for the week. So that's gonna leave us with wealth. We're gonna wrap up this week with wealth, and we're gonna tell a couple stories in wealth today. So I'm gonna start by asking you a question. What was the first house you bought?
You asking me?
Mm-hmm.
First house we bought was a townhouse in Ypsilanti, Michigan.
You mind telling us the story?
No, we moved to Michigan. We had 2 children, and we were gonna be there for 3 years. I went to school, and so we bought a townhouse. I think it costs about $20,000.
Ypsilanti, Michigan, University of Michigan.
Yes.
Townhome. Did mom find it? Did you find it? Who did the
looking? We went back there and started looking for housing. Ann Arbor was tough because of students, 40,000 students looking for housing. Ypsilanti was about 10 miles away, and these were available, and we we got some help and we purchased it.
How did you get some help? You go to the bank, you go to
Well, we had a friend
hmm,
that was willing to help us.
yeah. So he bought it outright, or he bought it on,
No, he just gave us some money and we bought it.
and then you made payments.
Yeah,
Then what happened 3 years later?
we sold it
And moved somewhere else?
moved to Salt Lake.
Moved to Salt Lake. Yeah. Well, good. Good. So why didn't you just go to the bank?
Because my credit wasn't there. I was a student, been a student for, let's see, I've been in medical school for 4 years and undergraduate school for 3 years. So I didn't have much credit.
Yeah, and that's a common theme. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. So that's interesting that I never knew that you had even bought a house in Ypsilanti. So I have a brother that always wears University of Michigan gear and cheers for the Wolverines.
Well, he was born there.
He was born there. It sounds like he was about 2 when you moved from there. So I don't know how
No, he was just
big blue he really is.
He was just 8 months old when we moved.
Well, that's good. He keeps the family history alive. So I'm going to go back in time a little bit. When Brendan and I got married about 21 years ago, we went out looking for a house to buy too. And everybody told us the way you buy a house is you go to the bank and you get pre-approved. And so we did that. And the bank gave us a letter that said we were approved to shop around for houses that cost $109,000. So we started looking around. We were trying to buy a place in Junction City, and we started looking around for anything that cost $109,000. And this is in about 2004 or 5. We had 2 kids as well at that time, and the problem was that everything in Junction City cost 140 at that time, 130, 140. So we were a little surprised because what we were approved for didn't even exist in the town. But we were also kind of disappointed because we're like, oh, our dream of owning a home and having a place to raise our kids and paint the walls and make their bedrooms was it seemed like it was completely out of reach. So we went to a couple people we knew who were selling houses for around 140 or 130, and we asked them if they'd sell it to us for 109 because that's what we were approved for. And they said no, which is fine. That makes sense that they would say no. We were asking for a huge discount, but the reason we were asking for the discount is because that's all we were approved for. So anyways, we were really excited about getting into real estate and owning a home like a lot of Americans are, and yet it was out of reach to us using those conventional ways. So then we learned this, we had to learn something. And there's a saying I like, and it comes from a guy who wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he said, why are you getting advice from the same people that are stuck in traffic with you? So if you're going to work every day and you're stuck in the morning rush hour traffic, and you look over into the car next to you, and your banker or your real estate advisor or your financial advisor is stuck in the same traffic as you, he's stuck in the same rat race as you, why are you getting advice from him on this topic? Kind of an interesting question. He's trying to get you to think about the people you get advice for, and that's kind of the name of his book was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because he had a great dad who was poor, and he had another kind of father figure who was rich. And his poor dad, his quote unquote poor dad, recommended that he go talk to his rich dad if he actually wanted advice on starting a business. And that was, so he again, just that idea that you're going to want to get advice from people who aren't stuck in the same rat race as you are if you actually want to change your circumstances. So the rat race that I was in at the time said you can't buy a house. But because I started listening to this other guy and I started talking to people that had bought houses, even when they weren't pre approved for the right amount, then I learned this whole other system that allowed us to get into real estate, even though the bank said we couldn't. And that's kind of the principle I'm trying to share with you today. It's the same principle he's teaching about MS, or using baking soda or using salt to give yourself some of the, if in America 50% of us or 30% of us are dying of heart disease, you don't want to keep doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. If in America you can't afford a home, you don't want to keep using the same method to get into real estate that everybody else is using, the method that's telling you you can't do it. In health, America Healthcare is telling you you're going to die of heart disease. In wealth, the America tradition right now is that you're part of the 99%, which means you're never going to be wealthy. Now you have to ask yourself, do you want to be in that system, or do you want to learn to be in a different system where you don't die of heart disease and you actually can acquire wealth and you can take back some of the freedoms that the government has usurped over the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years? So that's the gist of what we're talking about. I always tell you that if you're interested in learning more or being part of Freedom Bees, then the first step is to subscribe to the channel. That tells us that you're interested. The next step is then, of course, we could start interacting on certain topics. We could get you information that you're interested in, or you could share information with us that you think would be beneficial for us. I really appreciate the people out there that are already sending me information and good tips. It's really fun to have that interaction, and that's what this is all about. So we'll leave it at that for today. If you don't want the outcome that everybody else is getting, you have to decide to do something different. Okay? And the fact is, in America, there's certain outcomes. That's the trend. That's the majority. They're going down a certain path. You, as an American, though, are free to choose to go down a little different path. It was sad. The other day I saw a post by a friend from high school, and she basically was explaining that the American dream is gone for most of us. That's the fact of the matter. Percentage-wise, that is the case. But it's not the case if you're willing to do something a little bit different than what everybody else is doing. So had another friend this week. It was awesome. He said on his post, he said, I've been drinking for years. It's never benefited me. I'm going to stop drinking. Well, good for him, right? He realized that the drinking led him to a certain place every weekend, led him to certain behavior, whatever that is. He realized it wasn't actually helping him progress in life and become the kind of person he wanted. So he had to have the courage to assess the situation and decide he wanted to do something a little different. We all need that same courage. That's not just a house buying problem. It's not just a drinking problem. It's the reality of being American. We all need to have the courage to do things a little differently if the way they're being done isn't leading to our prosperity and freedom. So, going to leave you with that for now. Anything else you want to throw in there?
No, there's I think our whole culture has been gradually conditioned through the education system, through government pressures, through the banks, to rely more and more on government.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, $34 trillion in debt.
Yep.
Most of us are struggling, and yet we continue to look to the same source for information. We've got to break out of that paradigm. Got to change the paradigm.
Yep.
But it takes courage, and it's frightening. But that's okay. Things will work out if you have faith in God and you stay close and say your prayers. You know, there's a scripture in the book of Isaiah that says, trust God in all things.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to understand what God has in mind for you and understand your purpose in life and then move ahead. It's a challenge, but it's the only way to get out of this mess we're in.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's really true. And if we could, even just for a few minutes a day, even for a few minutes a week, if we could think and actually visualize a loving God and what he desires for you.
If we've got time, let me just
Go ahead. You got time.
Johnny and his family went down to do a video for Brenda's cousin, and he came back with a T-shirt, said, "What's your purpose?" I think I wore it in one of the videos. It's the green T-shirt I had on the other last week. And we were in, and we had one of my daughters and her husband came up from Salt Lake, and he saw that T-shirt, and he said, "Oh, what do you think about that outfit?" Because that's kind of the name of an organization that Brenda's cousin is associated with. And see, God works in strange ways. Why did I choose to wear that T-shirt? Why did Johnny give me that T-shirt? Well, Mike, my son-in-law, said that organization was responsible for finding a cousin or a nephew or uncle of mine that had been missing for 20 years. And he told us the story, and it was very touching, and it brought tears to his eyes. And they were so grateful for this organization. How did that work out? See, God works in ways that we don't understand. But like Johnny said, God is, we are all spiritual children of a loving Heavenly Father. We're individuals as His children with a divine nature and purpose. God wants to help us if we give Him a chance. And so we've got to learn to rely more on God and less on the flesh.
Yeah.
But we have to be willing. I had to have the courage to wear that T-shirt. No, this is a joke. But God works it out in that way. And we learned a lot about my son-in-law. And it's a very touching experience. We were all sitting around talking to him. And anyway, it's very special. And that's part of families.
Yeah, yeah. It was awesome for us, and I hope it was fun for Mike too to share with us. But yeah, so if you picture God and you picture He wants good things for you, that doesn't mean easy. That doesn't mean no challenges. It doesn't mean no obstacles. It just means He has this vision of you of being great. And so, how do you get to that vision? It's very rarely that we just stay in our lane to get to that vision that God has for us. Normally, what that vision requires, you think about anybody in the scriptures, Moses, David, Samuel, all these guys, even Saul before he became corrupted, they weren't what they became. And that's the same for you. It's the same for you in health. It's the same for you in wealth. It's the same for us in stealth. We are not currently what we can become with God's help. And that's the key to this whole thing is being willing to change, being willing to seek God's help, and being willing to then, as a result of those two things, improve or greatly improve your life. So
you've got to have the courage to act on the promptings you get from God. You get an idea, and Satan puts promptings in our minds too. You get an idea that everything that's good comes from God. So you get an idea to help somebody. Then the next thought you get, thanks to Satan, is to, oh, gee, he won't want my help. Oh, that's too hard. Oh, I can't afford to. No, you've got to have the courage to act on the first impulse to do good, not on those second impulses to discourage you.
Mhm.
And it takes practice, and it's hard. But that's life. It should be hard. It's got to be hard because we need to learn and grow, and growth is hard.
Okay, that's Freedom Bees for the week. Take care. We'll see you in person or one of these places online. Thanks a lot.
Well, let's see. How long did was that an hour?
Probably close to an hour.
Oh,
Yeah, 15 minutes.
if they suffer through that, that's encouraging.
Well, yeah, I mean,